Hello again, baseball romantics, and welcome back to the RAB podcast. This is Jason with you. Got my battery mate Bruce on board, and we have another exciting special episode for you. We have a special guest. Super grateful and excited to have Xavier Scruggs on with us. A little background on Mr. Scruggs. He is a former standout player at UNLV. He was Mountain West Conference Player of the Year in 2008. He was drafted originally by Seattle and then signed after being drafted with the St. Louis Cardinals in 2008. He played for the Cardinals organization and the Marlins for a time, but he is so much more than that. Besides also playing in the Korean baseball and Mexican leagues, Xavier has become the St. Louis Cardinals diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. He also is a broadcaster. He has served with ESPN as an analyst since 2021. He co-hosts MLB Network's Off Base since April of 2022, which is focused on youth baseball and culture. He runs his own podcast called The Bigs and is active across social media channels. And on top of all that, he's also an entrepreneur. He founded Extraordinary Athletes to help athletes build their personal brands. So just to summarize here, that's a lot, Xavier. That's a lot. That's a lot of good stuff on a resume, man. So rose from a standout UNLV college career to stints in MLB, the KBO, and the Mexican League. He smoothly transitioned into roles in diversity, advocacy, and sports media, bringing insight, personality, and purpose to broadcast and beyond. A glowing review from Mr. Scruggs. We're happy to have him. Xavier, welcome. And anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job. I appreciate you having me. Excited to be here and excited to chop it up with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll give Bruce all the credit for that glowing intro. I want to make sure credit where credit is due. So yeah, we'll just jump right in there. We got a lot of questions. First of all, just awesome to have you on. Awesome, all this experience you have. We're going to dig in here. You know, this podcast and our Facebook page is based around just a love of the game, and you obviously have a lot of knowledge, and I would imagine you have a lot of love of the game yourself, having played it and broadcasting. So a great leadoff question here. I think you played professionally in the U.S., Korea, and Mexico. How did those different baseball cultures shape your perspective on the game and also life off the field?
Yeah, no, I think playing internationally and people will tell you just from spending time internationally, your whole perspective changes. And I think in one of the biggest ways for me is just realizing that it's impossible to really find yourself open if you take your ways from the United States or wherever you're from into somebody else's culture. You have to really kind of be open to new ways and new patterns of life and new discoveries and new environments. And I feel like that really allowed my perspective to open as far as cultural differences and, and how much we're different, but also how much we're alike in so many different ways. And I think there's also an idea of really appreciating where you come from too, right? And you appreciate it that much more as well once you see some of those differences. But I think from a baseball standpoint, I think it was special because you got to see, how different cultures did it as far as celebrating the game. And we're talking about the love of the game right now, and it's almost got a different viewpoint from so many different cultures and different backgrounds. So I thought I took kind of that away from that from a playing perspective, but outside was really what I took more of. And it's helped shape me more as a human being and not just a player, but somebody that has gone, after their playing days, taking that same perspective and using it in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who has not traveled overseas in my life yet, we've talked before about how baseball, when I go to a park I've never been to before and I meet people that I've never met before, and even Bruce and I, who just met a few months ago, baseball can be like a language barrier breaker, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk ball if we can't talk anything else. We may have different political views. We don't know, like, but we can talk baseball. Did you find it's
Right.
kind of the same thing when you go to these other countries? Is that kind of universal for everybody?
Yeah. No, especially Korea, in which, at least Latin countries, they have the same alphabet. You've heard words before. You can speak some of that. I have a Cuban wife, so naturally I kind of learned Spanish. But Korea was kind of an example of what you're talking about because I didn't know any Korean. The alphabet is completely different. It's characters. So if I'm looking at a building, it could be a doctor's office, it could be a restaurant, it could be, some type of, other office. I wouldn't know the difference of it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think just this idea of being able to talk with guys on the team just from a baseball standpoint really helped open me up. It made me feel more comfortable. Like you mentioned, the game of baseball is kind of its own language in a sense.
Yeah.
So it's really special to be able to have those types of conversations that really make you feel like you're in a familiar space, and definitely helps you gravitate towards certain people, certain characteristics, and just this game of baseball keeps you so close to others that love it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Bruce, what you got, man?
Yeah. So one of the things, so the page is called Romantic About Baseball. So one of the things that we do a lot of times, and even when we're just sitting here and chatting before shows, after shows, we just talk about little moments, little things we remember that
Yeah.
made us love the game, enjoy the game, milestone type moments. So for me, as somebody who did play for a bit, I have these moments in my head that I always remember, right? I remember when I pitched at Veterans Stadium. I remember a lot of little things from my past that to me are just, and I probably don't remember them exactly what they happened at this point, but that doesn't matter. In your career, whether it be wherever it was, what milestone, what moment or moments stand out to you still today that are those moments that you go back to in your head and in your mind and just remember them with this romantic fondness? Could have been your first home run. It could have been, I don't know. There's lots of those moments we have on the field or with our teammates. What stands
Yeah.
out to you today looking back?
Yeah, I would say one of those moments has to be my first home run, my first, and I'm not even talking about major league home run. I'll go back to little league first. That to me was kind of an excitement, a jolt of energy. I was 11 years old. I remember kind of the ball, just the way it sailed over the fence. And it was kind of this idea of, man, like, I feel like I can be good at this. I feel like I want to repeat that same feeling over and over and over again. And I remember rounding the bases and having the same chills that I had when I hit my first major league home run at PNC Park as a Marlin. I remember, floating around first, second base, seeing Lenny Harris at third, dapping him up, coming home. And then Ichiro was at home plate waiting for me,
Wow.
dapped him up, going to the dugout, and Don Mattingly's there. He was my manager at the time. Give him a high five. Barry Bonds was my hitting coach, gave him a hug. And it's just this idea of you work so hard, to show what you're capable of doing at the highest level. It comes full circle and brings you back to the very first time that you did it and all the moments in between in which you've been working for. So those are two moments specifically from almost the beginning of when I started this thing to the very first one at the major league level. It kind of made it that much sweeter in between.
That's really funny that you mentioned that because I remember that too. My first home run was Little League. I was 11 as well, and it's just a memory you just don't that feeling when you're that age in that
Yeah.
moment because not everybody hits home runs in Little League, right? It's not
Right. Right.
you're not hitting 25 home runs, you're hitting one or two, and
I
those
couldn't
moments
call
are just
in
as
the
an
league.
11 or 12-year-old, and
I
that
remember
that
my first
moment.
walk in Little League. That was I knew I was going to be a lifelong baseball fan pretty quick in my early career.
That's good.
So, and this isn't on our list, but it makes me think. First of all, those stories are the perfect example of romantic about baseball. But so you played Little League. So when you were that age, Xavier, who was your hero, your baseball idol that you looked up to and wanted to emulate?
Yeah, I grew up in San Diego, so Tony Gwynn was my guy. Like just the way that he was able to fillet the baseball all over the field wherever he wanted to in any single count. Always felt like he put the ball in play with 2 strikes, had a short, compact swing. And I was right-handed, so I was always trying to find the way to have like those quick wrists that he had, but do it maybe not so pretty, right? The lefties do it so pretty. It's crazy, right?
Why are lefty swings always so pretty and sweet?
Man, I think it has to do with them, like the natural going towards first base, right? It's like that natural hip movement towards first. I feel like is a little bit smoother. I don't know, but naturally Tony Gwynn, and then also Gary Sheffield was one of my favorites because I felt like he attacked the baseball with such like viciousness.
Oh
And
yeah.
I always felt like I wanted to attack the baseball like that, but he was still such a disciplined hitter, like one of the best power hitting, most disciplined guys at the plate. And that was something that I wanted to emulate, is that just vicious swing, but it had so much control to it, and the ball just jumped off his bat.
Yeah,
See,
absolutely. I wish I
we
had known
always
that.
preached this idea of controlled aggression as a
Yeah.
hitter, and he embodied that. When you
He did.
watched him, he embodied the soul of controlled aggression at the plate, and his
Definitely.
swing was fantastic.
Yeah, Gwen is my all-time favorite non-Braves. I'm a Braves fan, obviously, and I have a Tony Gwynn hat. Had I known, I would have worn my Tony Gwynn hat. But yeah, absolutely. He just and filleted the baseball. By the way, that's my new favorite phrase. Filleted the baseball all over the field. That's fantastic. So back to our little list of questions here, Xavier. You become a prominent voice in baseball media. What inspired your shift from playing to broadcasting, and what has been the most rewarding part of that transition?
Yeah, originally I wasn't, extremely like gravitating towards the media side. When 2020 happened, that's when I had just got done playing in Mexico and was hoping for another opportunity to play, in Major League Baseball, or at the very least minor leagues, maybe Korea. And then there was no baseball, right? And the only thing that was going on was Korea. ESPN was showing broadcasts of that, and they asked me to come jump on for 10 minutes, talk about my experiences over there. And I realized that I was really fond of talking about the game. And I didn't necessarily know that passion was there previously. And so I asked them for more opportunities to see if I could do that on their Korean broadcasts. And they gave me a couple more opportunities, and I said, wait, how do I get into this like media side of things? If my career may be done, how do I even look towards doing that? And they kind of shooed me off to the side, like, hey, go to your local high school, get some reps, go to your local college if you can. But I think the reason they did that is because a lot of athletes that may transition outside of playing, they're not so serious about commitment, right? They want to try different things. They're not sure what they want to do. And like producers especially at ESPN, they want you to be serious about doing something. And I really had to let them know that I was adamant about possibly pursuing the media side. And they gave me a couple more opportunities. I did a full Korean broadcast in 2020 and felt like, okay, maybe there's a lane here, and tried to start doing some radio during that same time. Eduardo Perez, one of my mentors in this game, Sunday Night Baseball broadcast, been doing it for a while. He mentioned like, hey, try to do some radio. That'll help your communication. I started a podcast during that time and just try to run with communicating about baseball, and ultimately got some opportunities from ESPN the next year. A senior director called me. He said, hey, I never got to talk to you in 2020, but I want to let you know 2021, we'd like to give you some college games and some major league games, and we'd love if you could do it from home. And I said, wait, you want me to call games from the crib and I can still be with my family, and you're going to pay me to do this? I would love to. And so it's kind of like that idea for me. God was telling me, okay, here's another lane. If baseball is done playing, like, you should probably run after this as hard as you can. And I tried to do so.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
I appreciate
So, Bruce, what else you got, man?
Yeah, I want to vary a little bit back to our about the romantic idea. When you talked about that home run you hit at PNC Park, so it triggers for me. I was just at PNC Park last weekend. And you probably don't know this. I'm I live near Philadelphia, and we have Citizens Bank Park, but like Jason said, we go all over the place. PNC Park, 2 rows behind what I'll just call stereotypical Philadelphia fans, because it's Pittsburgh, so you've got probably 60% of the stadium's Phillies fans, right?
Right.
So just sitting back there and listening to them hoot and holler, and do the Philly thing that everybody knows them for. But as you went through and talked about that, and I'm picturing it because I was just there. But you dropped a few names in that process.
Yeah.
You talked about Lenny, you talked about Barry Bonds, Don Mattingly, and these are all people we all know and we all remember. So talking about Barry Bonds a little bit as a hitting coach, what was that experience like for you as a player with Barry standing there, who is Barry Bonds?
Yeah.
I know his approach wasn't always something that all the players took to. How was that interaction for you? What do you remember about that? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, his approach was different. There's no doubt about that. He let it be known that he was, one of the best of all time. He wasn't shy about letting you know. But I think that was a part of his coaching style and to help kind of build trust within the player, right? And I got along great with Barry. I think there was this natural gravitation from me that I wanted to soak in as much information as possible, even if it's him working with other hitters. Like, I want to hear what he has to say. I want to know what he's saying, because like the great ones, it doesn't matter what industry, right? Like the very great ones, that their thoughts are different than the way normal people think. And I wanted to take that away. And yeah, there was some guys that didn't get along with them great, and I think his coaching style was just a little bit different than a lot of guys are used to. Very brash, very in your face if he needed to be at times. Very honest, right? Nowadays, you got we live in a society where you feel like you stepping on somebody's toes if you're being honest at times. So he was just himself, and I think I appreciated that. But also just listening to how he thought about the game a little bit differently, how he thought about hitting a little bit differently. And an example of that is kind of this idea of having you do, some different types of movements off the tee. I remember he would put the tee extremely high, like around your head, and try to get you to hit the ball like straight into the ground. And in a day in which we're talking more about launch angle, you're like, what good is it that I'm hitting the ball straight into the ground? And he was trying to even out guys' swings to be more direct to the baseball, try to make you think about getting your barrel into a different bat path. He talked a lot about catching the baseball instead of trying to hit it with your barrel. You're trying to just create a movement that catches the baseball on the way up. And so just listening to certain things was special for me, because it helped open my eyes into different ways and different perspectives and thinking about approaching the game. And why not listen to the best who's ever done it?
That's fantastic. Fantastic.
What's it like? Well, I just got to ask this question. Apologies, Bruce. I'm just thinking, you're the first recent former player that we've talked to, so I just got to ask, like, what's it like standing in a batter's box in a Major League Baseball park and face a guy who's throwing 95, 96, whatever it was? Like, how fast does that ball get on you? And what, when you first took that first big league pitch, like, what was your thought process?
Man, it gives me chills thinking about that now, you saying that, just because it's something as a hitter that you've conditioned your mind and your body to be able to do it so many times over and over. And what you've done is really condition yourself to slow down 96, 97, and to be able to give yourself time. But what does speed it up is when somebody else has not only that 96, 97, but he also has that slider that breaks 6 inches, right? And he has that curveball that comes over the top and goes 12-6. And he has that changeup that dives down and in towards righties. And it's just this idea of the game can speed up because of the crowd noise, because of all the external factors. And really, you're just trying to minimize it to you and that pitcher. Almost an example would be like if I'm just in the cage at the local batting cage and nobody else is really around. Everybody else is hitting, but I don't see them. I'm just like locked in on that one machine. And that's how I ultimately kind of see it is you try to slow it down. The game moves fast when you don't have that tunnel vision. But it's not easy, right? I got the opportunity to face guys like Jacob deGrom, whose ball's moving with pinpoint accuracy, but the nasty stuff that has the late movement. Chris Sale at a time in which he was with the White Sox, in which it felt like the slider was coming out of the first base batter's box or the first base dugout. And you're just trying to time it up with your barrel a little bit. Aroldis Chapman throwing 104 miles an hour. So you're just like try to condition yourself to make it not seem as big as the moment is, right? And almost like, okay, I've been doing this so much that I'm just doing another at bat. I'm just taking another at bat. It doesn't matter that there's 30,000 fans screaming, but I'm just trying to take another at bat.
What pitch did you hit the first home run off of?
First home run was a sinking fastball off of Chad Kuhl. I think it was like 93, 94, down
Nice.
and in that I got the barrel to, and I smoked it out.
Awesome. I figured you remembered.
Yeah.
Bruce, you want to take the next one, man?
Yeah, so I love your description of that tunneling and how those moments are, because I like to tell my friends that we've all seen all these baseball movies, right? There's just a ton of movies out there. There's a lot of good ones out there. They tend to play on the lighter side, but I remember when I first saw For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, and he gets up on the mound and he does this clear the mechanism, and I'm like, that is exactly what it's like
Yeah.
to be standing there. So that you just brought that back to me a little bit. And I love that movie for that. And also later in the game when he can't quite do it, when he's trying to do it. And those moments when you can't clear your mind and focus in on those things. So along those lines, do you have a favorite baseball movie, X?
Favorite baseball. I'm more on the light heart. I do like For the Love of the Game. That is one of my favorites. And I think because it takes you through, those 9 innings of him and the progression of, how each inning you're trying to focus more in, but you have these outside thoughts, and it gives you a good sense of kind of what a guy is like competing at a high level. I also like Major League. I'm a huge like Major League. Keep it fun. That's what a clubhouse should be like, right? Your back's up against the wall. How can you enjoy it? It's funny because I continue to think like teams like the Rockies who's really struggling, right? Teams like the White Sox, and I'm like, man, if they have those types of clubhouses, maybe they can get out of something like that. But it just keeps it lighthearted, keeps it fun, and you have so many different characters that represent like what you see on a real team. There's so many different guys from so many different backgrounds that are going through so many different things, but all trying to push together for one collective goal. So I love Major League.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I love it. Love it. So, talking a little bit about your work in DEI with the Cardinals, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities you've seen in making baseball more inclusive? And I'll add a little bit to that. I know a narrative has been going on for quite a while now of the lower number of African Americans in the sport. Obviously the Latin players have become more prominent. Is that something that you talk about? Is that something that you look at? And just in general, what is working in the DEI in baseball brought to your attention the most?
Yeah. Just to be clear, I had the consultant role in 2021. I no longer work with the Cardinals, but it's something I'm still very passionate about. I think one of my biggest things, and I still push towards this idea of giving guys all the information that they need to have, right? So whether that be the percentages of what, the blacks playing in the game and what that looks like now, but also, some of the things that we can do to prepare ourselves whether it be minor league or major league, going to specific cities and understanding kind of the differences in those cities. I think being prepared for those things on and off the field are just as important. And some of the initiatives that I had with the Cardinals is, helping guys understand that, they have a voice in the organization. I think it's important to know that you can speak and be yourself, that you're in a position to where you can succeed. I think a lot of times as players, and this doesn't matter what color, what ethnicity, what background, we feel like here's the GM, here's the president of operations, and we're down here and they don't even see us. And I think that can be the same for any workforce, right? But I think once you understand that there's actually communication between players, whether they're the minor leagues and the major leagues, alongside the front office, an organization works better when everybody has a voice. And I think that was kind of one of the main initiatives that has continued to be carried on within the Cardinals organization. Because if you remember, back in 2020, there was a lot of the social injustice conversations, right? A lot of racial disputes, a lot of stuff going on with police enforcement, and just trying to educate myself, but also educate others and understanding what's going on around them society wise. It doesn't matter, who's right or wrong, but giving that information is important. And I think we've got to continue to do that within the game.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Bruce?
So whether you're on the radio or on podcasts, you talk a lot about the connections between players, between fans, between cultures. I remember you told a story a couple of weeks ago about playing baseball, and I can't remember where it was now, but you were talking about it being like a little league game where you just threw you got your jersey and your towel and your walk into the field and all this stuff. And it was a good story. But what conversations are you hoping to spark? What are you hoping to create as far as of conversations with younger players as they come up, whether it's creating expectations, whether it's you talked about clubhouse culture, about having fun, helping you get out of some of these things. What types of things would you, as a former player and someone who's now grown into a media personality that people listen to, what are you not trying necessarily, but what are you trying to deliver to those people who are just coming up now?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, there's such a connection between the history of the game and where we are now. Like, obviously, things have changed and things will constantly change, but I would want, young players to really understand the history of the game and understand what guys have done previous to where we are now. Because I think without understanding our history of the game, it's hard to make real strides forward in a sense. And whether that be, really understanding who Jackie Robinson was and what he went through to get to where we are today, or if it's understanding your own organization. I remember having a conversation, Christian Campbell, with the rookie with the Boston Red Sox, and hearing about how they've tried to teach him so much about the Red Sox history and how he's felt like it's made him a better player, understanding the type of organization that he's with and what he represents as a player and what he represents wearing the uniform. I think those things are so important. And a lot of my tagline stuff is like bridging the gap between, generations of this game. And I think that's important to do because we want to be able to speak to a generation that can be older, but also, okay, what are those parallels to the younger generation? What can we teach them about the game that maybe they're missing as the game continues to change? So I think those things are things that I like to do. And that can be speaking about statistics, new age, old age statistics. One of the things, and I'll give you an example of that, is like, we're trying to discard like what the RBI means right now and the run and being able to drive in runs. And I think, no matter if it's a situation that you can control or not, there's something different about a player that comes up clutch. And we've all seen it, right? There's that player that seems like they do so well with runners on base, late in the game. But then there's that player that does well when nobody's on base. And it's like late in the game, they can't get a hit. So I think there is something to the RBI still, even though we want to discount it. So just like this idea that certain numbers don't just go away, right? And I think those are the things that I'm trying to bridge the gap with.
You just gained a lot of fans on our page because we've got a lot of a lot of guys about our age, and that's the old stats. We still like them. I'm both. I
Yeah.
love the new stuff too, but I love what you hit on there about the history of the game because I do think for all the things I feel like Major League Baseball does well, sometimes I feel like they romanticize a little too much about their past. So like Jackie Robinson, right? We have Jackie Robinson Day, and everybody loves that day, and we honor Jackie and should. What about the rest of the year? And what about Willie Mays
Yeah.
and Hank
Yeah.
Aaron? And even in Atlanta, they have a great tribute to Hank Aaron there at the ballpark. But the narrative is always about chasing the record and not the things he was up against while he was chasing that record and the
Mm,
things he had to face. I think we kind of gloss over that, and I think that's an
yes.
important part of the story that sometimes they're not great at telling. So I would like to see them do more in the future. In that regard, let's tell the whole story. We were talking about
Mm,
the Pete Rose deal. Like, do you put Pete Rose in? Do you not? And I said, put him in, but you got to tell the story. You got to tell the whole
mm,
story, and put it on there. So I love what you were saying there about the history because I think me and Bruce, as dads, we like to teach our kids. I love to take my kids to the park and show them the Hank Aaron stuff and talk about the
yeah.
past. But I don't think we do enough of that. So I love
No,
what you said.
you're absolutely right. And I think, I'm hoping, obviously with the All-Star game being in Atlanta this year, we
Yeah,
understand that Hank Aaron is going to be celebrated because he was supposed to be celebrated a couple years ago,
yeah,
before the passing. But I just look at, an opportunity to celebrate guys, as you mentioned, comes too far between times, right?
yeah,
And we can do it more often and help people understand kind of what guys went through during certain times. And that's why I have such an appreciation because my father was one of the ones that kind of broke down to me, hey, this is what this player was going through, not just on the field, but off the field.
yeah.
And so many different guys like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talked about Larry Doby around Jackie Robinson Day and how he doesn't
Mm,
get the same
yeah,
attention. And guys like that, their story needs to be told.
right.
Um, so kind of looking back, just summarizing, Xavier, your journey from college to the big leagues and now broadcasting, what advice would you give to young athletes trying to navigate that kind of path through baseball and then beyond?
Yeah, I think, specifically through baseball is like, and this goes for so many aspects of life. You guys know, it's just like, how can I it's almost this tunnel vision we talked about is how can I just make myself better on a day-to-day basis? Because we're getting evaluated as human beings, as players, but it's like, I can't worry about what so and so thinks of me so much. I can't worry about, what this farm director thinks of me. I can't worry about what the other second baseman that's one level ahead, what's going on with him, right? I've got to just lock in on doing what I can do to get better. And eventually the chips will fall where they should. And this is someone that played in the minor leagues for 6 years before being called up. There's so many outside factors that try to get in your dome. And that's why I think baseball is such a grind because it's like you're doing it for 162 games out of 180 days. But you've got to figure out ways to get better every day. So that's one thing I give them that are playing. But then from a transition standpoint, is like figure out what you were good at, what characteristics that you have that helped you in baseball. What did you learn in sports that you can transition to taking into that next phase of life? My father-in-law used to tell me that, and still kind of tells me, hey, you play 4 innings of your 9 inning life. You have at least 5 innings. What are you going to do with those other innings? That's more than the actual innings that you played. So kind of this idea of, how can I impact the world in a different way or others around me in a different way after my playing days?
That's awesome. I like that. It's really good. Bruce, what else you got, man, before we let him go?
Yeah, so yeah, one more thing. I know that one of the biggest things you talk about on social media is that idea that nobody prepared you for the day you weren't going to play again. So
Mm,
you just mentioned that, right? Your father-in-law reminds you all the time that baseball is this much of your life. You still have
yeah.
all the rest of your life to live. You mentioned earlier, you're putting your son to bed, because there's so much of life around what we do as professionals, no matter what that is. Um, for those players who are playing right now, who are, you mentioned Jacob DeGrom. Well, Jacob DeGrom's now getting to mid to late point in his career, right? He's not a
Yeah.
kid anymore. You've got, there's several of those players. what advice would you give them as they're starting to approach, maybe they just signed that last contract, right? Pete Alonso's going to come up. Whether he walks from the Mets or whether he re-signs with a big contract, this is going to be his contract.
Yeah. Yeah.
What advice would you give those guys?
Yeah, I would tell them to be doing exactly what you guys are doing right now, having conversations about what they love. Because I think that's one thing that I tried to do maybe a year too late, right? Like I had to get to that point where it was like, oh, what's going to be next? Let me start communicating. Let me start a podcast. Let me start talking. But doing it while you're playing, putting yourself out there a little bit more. And I know it's tough to do as players, but I think the more and more that they can do it, it'll prepare themselves for outside of the game, but also give them some opportunities for people to learn who they are as people. That's one thing I always kind of wanted while I was playing, is for people to know me as a person outside of, just playing. And I didn't want my identity to just be in a baseball player. I want it to be so much more. And I think that's what's kind of urged me and pushed me to do a lot of other different things, because I know that I could impact off the field just as much as on the field. So I would tell those guys to just be adamant about kind of creating that brand for themselves, but doing it in a positive manner. Understanding that there's so many negative influences out there today. Like we call them influencers, but they're not really influencing in a positive way. And I would just tell them to strive after being a positive influence on their digital platforms, but also on and off the field.
Yeah, let me get one more question, Jason, then you can wrap it up, because I gotta ask this question, because we got Roman Anthony just got called up, Jack Caglianone just got called up. We got all these young, highly touted prospects coming up right now, kind of literally. Not just those two guys, but of all these guys that are coming up now or about to come up, if you had to pick one that you thought was going to be a superstar, which one is it?
Oh man.
Just one, though. Just one.
That's tough, man. I like a lot of these dudes. I mentioned, Christian Campbell. I like a lot. Marcelo Meyer. Man, there's a lot of dudes. Jack, I think Jack Caglianone, you mentioned. I think he's got the opportunity to be, kind of like maybe like an Aaron Judge power type. Like the ball just comes off his bat so easily. And obviously there's got to be consistency and being able to hit the ball, and have really good at bats and good plate discipline and pitch recognition on all of that. That's what Judge has at the highest level right now.
Well, it took him a couple of years. He didn't have that anyway.
Exactly. And I think Jack has that power, and I'm also a little biased towards him because he grew up in Tampa. I live in Tampa. I've gotten to see him play a lot at Florida, but I think that's also given me this idea that I know he can be that type of person because I've seen him play a lot. So I think when you mentioned that name, that jumped out to me, just especially from a power standpoint. I haven't really seen power like his in a long time.
Yeah.
Man, he put you on the spot there. That was good stuff.
Yeah, you did, man.
Xavier, I can't thank you enough. I started this page a little over a year ago just for fun, and I never imagined I'd be doing a podcast, and met this awesome dude here, Bruce, and
That's so cool.
I'm just having a blast. To be able to talk to somebody like you with your credentials, your background, it's just amazing. And I'm so grateful that you came on and talked to us and spent time with us. And just thank you, man. I know it's a timeout, and glad you got your son to bed first. That's good. But we really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you.
Nah, thank you guys for having me, man. I always love talking ball and appreciate what you guys are doing. Let me know when everything kind of comes out. I would love to help promote, put whatever on my page too. So I'm all about it.
Absolutely. I just followed you on Twitter or X, whatever.
Awesome. Yeah, whatever we're calling
it. It's still Twitter, man. It's still Twitter.
I like X better. I like X better, Bruce.
Well, X fits you really well. Yeah. Thank you, Xavier. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, guys. You guys have a good night.
You too, man.
You too. Thank you.
That was good stuff, man. I'm glad he made it on. That was fantastic. That was good.
Yeah, he was great.
Awesome guy. Yeah.
That was good stuff.